We've got some bad news for Pixel fans. We've just gotten to look at the spec sheet for the upcoming Pixel 10, and there's a lot more downgrades than there are upgrades. So starting off with that display, it's a 6.3-inch Full HD Plus OLED display. It's still going to be 120 Hz, something that Apple won't give you unless you spend $1,000. But the only upgrade on the display is actually going to be the brightness. So it's going to jump up to 3000 nits of peak brightness from 2700 nits last year. And in high brightness mode, it'll also jump up to 2000 nits. So it's going to be incrementally brighter than it was last year and bring it more in line with the Pro models that Google launched last year. Now, internally, we of course have the Tensor G5 processor. This is being manufactured on TSMC's 3nm process. So it's going to be a lot more efficient, or at least it should be a lot more efficient than the Samsung manufactured Tensor G4 from last year, which was already a pretty big upgrade from the Tensor G3. Now, it's going to be paired with 12 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, and 256 gigabytes of storage as another option. There won't be a 512 gigabyte or 1 terabyte option, unfortunately. That is still being reserved for the Pro models. Now, that battery is also getting an improvement this year. Capacity is jumping about 5% to 4,970 milliamp hour. That's up from 4,700 milliamp hour last year. Along with that, charging speeds are getting a very small upgrade. So it's jumping from 27 watts to 29 watts wired, which does sound pretty slow. But then again, Samsung is only offering 25 on its base model. It's saving the 45 watts for its Plus and Ultra models, which are a couple $100 more than what the Pixel 10 should be. And in wireless, we do have Qi 2 charging support here. So we're looking at 15 watts of Qi 2 wireless charging here, which means any Qi 2 wireless charger should be able to do the full 15 watts. But if it's not a Qi 2 charger, it'll likely do about 7.5 to 10. That is still quite slow, especially when you compare to OnePlus, who has 80 watts of wire charging and 50 watts of wireless charging. But those are also proprietary technologies from OnePlus/Oppo, where you're actually using a USB-A cable to get these speeds. So it's not USB-C PD like what Samsung and Google are using. Finally, let's talk about those cameras. That's where the big downgrades are happening this year. So that primary sensor is dropping from a 50 megapixel sensor to a 48 megapixel sensor. This is actually going to be the exact same sensor from the Google Pixel 9a that launched a few months ago. So that's a 1/2-inch sensor size, which is pretty small compared to what we had before. Moving on to the ultra-wide, is dropping from a 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera to a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. And then that new telephoto camera. This is a 5x telephoto camera at 10.8 megapixels. That sounds pretty bad, but it should also sound familiar because the Pixel 9 Pro Fold has that exact same camera. Now, while this likely sounds like a downgrade and looks like a downgrade on the physical spec sheet, it might actually turn into an upgrade. Let me explain. So Google has done some really amazing things with computational photography pretty much since the beginning of Pixel about 10 years ago. But that computational photography mostly only applies to these smaller sensors, which is likely why we've been seeing the 9a drop 2 smaller sensors and now the Pixel 10. While the Pixel 9 Pro and 9 Pro XL had larger sensors, and we expect the same for the 10 Pro and 10 Pro XL. This is also why the A series typically wins the blind camera test that different YouTubers do every year. And that's because computational photography is just that good from Google. Now, the Google Pixel 10 and the rest of the lineup should be announced on August 20th at a Made by Google event. We don't know yet where that's going to be. Last year was held in Mountain View at Google's headquarters. So we kind of expect them to do the same thing this year. Pre-orders will start that same day on August 20th, and devices will start shipping on August 28th.